Think of a joke, any joke. It could be something somebody texted you. It could be something you read, something you thought of yourself even. Stop. Now think, is the joke you're thinking of, is it sexist? Is it racist? Is it homophobic? Does it play on a stereotype? Or is it politically incorrect even? Does it hurt an already oppressed group of people? My name is Shehzad Ghias, and over the past decade in Pakistan, I've been using comedy as a social tool to create consciousness around social issues in this country. As a comedian, I see my role as much more than a mere gesture. For me, my philosophy of comedy is simply that it should matter. And here's how. Currently in the world, the conversation around comedy is one of political correctness. And a lot of people believe comedians should never offend somebody. I absolutely feel comedians should offend. The more interesting socio-political question to ask for me is, who are you offending? Is it the disenfranchised transgender on the street? Or is it the underlying power structures that keeps everybody oppressed? The first rule of this comedy that will be socially conscious, that will be culturally relevant, that will be politically aware is, you always make fun of the oppressor, not the oppressed. The idea is to punch up with your comedy, not punch down. There is absolutely nothing dank or cool or edgy to make a Holocaust joke or to joke about sexual assault. Think about it, even from a social good perspective, is it worth making somebody remember the worst thing that has ever happened to them just because it might make you laugh, all in the name of comedy itself? If you are to joke about anything, make sure the butt of the joke is the oppressor. If you are to make a Holocaust joke, make sure you mock the Nazis, not the Jews. Mock those in power. Mock those who have the power. Mock those who ensure that other people do not get that power. Because jokes absolutely have power. And every single time you tell a joke, you decide who you are empowering. Think about Pakistan. In a country where political comedy has been reduced to Imran Khan, Nawaz Sharif, Zardari dancing on Mudni Badnaam Hui on television. In a country like this, if you are to do political comedy that actually matters, there will be resistance. It will be offensive, and it might even put your life in jeopardy. Back in 2014, I made a video mocking the Taliban. It simply ridiculed the idea that we live in a country where a terrorist organization can demand 15 things from the government, including, ironically, equal rights for all. Think about it. We have terrorists asking for equal rights for all. Apparently, the Taliban are signatories to the United Nations Human Charter. And that put my life in danger. The Taliban threatened to kill my family. I did not take that video down. And not just because I do hate my family. In this country where the powerful are so powerful, David might not beat Goliath, but he will give him a bloody nose. And comedy is a great tool to do that. Because a lot of things become palatable when you tell them with a joke. Maybe a lot of things which I say in my stand-up comedy, had I said them straight out, I would be missing as well. Right before I was about to come back from my Fulbright back in 2015, a very dear friend of mine got shot dead. Just for doing an event, just for doing a talk. And I later found out the assailant was somebody I went to school with. So when I came back to Pakistan, for the first 3 months, I could not even get out of the house. I could not do a public event. I was told not to do public events. I was told there might be a security threat. When I managed to muster up the courage to actually put up a show, we did a show at the same place. We did an event at the same venue. And when an interviewer after the show asked me, do you feel like your life might be threatened just for doing a comedy show? It might be. But it's just as threatened as any one of yours. I'm not a hero. All of the people who showed up, their lives might be equally threatened. Let's admit it, we don't have any power when a person stands in front of us with a gun. But at least if I'm joking about it, I will go down laughing. And that gets me some power in the face of this lunacy. If we are to talk about political comedy, for years Jon Stewart was the moral conscience of America, who inspired Bassam Youssef, who galvanized an entire generation in Egypt. But what is the state of political comedy in Pakistan currently? You put on television. It's Bollywood songs set to cartoons of politicians dancing. Is that what we've been reduced to? Is there nothing more hilarious to us as a country than a politician calling another man Sahiba? Think about the politics of that joke. Not only does it imply women are weak, it also shows toxic masculinity. Anybody who is even slightly feminine is not a man. What do you think happens when this happens? When your favorite politician gets up on stage and calls another man a woman, and that is hilarious to us. Do you think those children will go to their schools and call somebody feminine in that school Sahiba? Is it still equally hilarious if millions of children are being bullied just because a politician thought it would be hilarious to bring somebody else down? Interestingly, jokes like this bring nobody down. Calling another politician Sahiba does nothing to challenge the status quo. It does nothing to challenge the power structure. It is that little exit valve in the pressure cooker that keeps him from blowing up. Because you're never mocking their policies, you're mocking the person. Which brings me to the second rule. You always make fun of what they do and what they say, not who they are. Calling somebody a woman, calling somebody Sahiba, does nothing to raise the political social consciousness about the policies. Compare that to what Hassan Minhaj does. Compare that to what John Oliver does. Compare that to what Colbert does. And unfortunately, there has been a degradation of content in Pakistan. This is not what political comedy has always been in this country. So when we talk about creating ideas and we look at America, the perception about black people for years was colored by minstrelsy shows. It was colored by white people playing black people in blackface, and a lot of that perception still persists. Now let's come back to Pakistan. During the 1980s, the stage shows were the most popular form of entertainment. A lot of you might have grown up laughing at those. One of the most popular ones is Bakra Kiston Pe. The first joke in that stage show is where Umar Sharif mistakenly ties his wife to the house and takes the cow out for shopping instead. It's great that some of you are laughing because now we can take a step back and think about the politics of that joke. What is the perception of women being set out for the world? And I'm not saying that Umar Sharif consciously sits at night and thinks about the jokes to bring down women, but comedy creates culture and the culture creates comedy. Jokes have power. What is being discussed, what is being perpetuated are the ideas that exist. So when the ideas you see on television are that of women being tied to the house, that is what you will believe in. Ironically, during Islamization, when female newscasters were made to wear dupattas while reading the news, mujras were very popular. Except there is no irony in this because mujras absolutely perpetuate the same ideas. A woman should stay in the house, and if she gets out of the house, she will be made into a prostitute. Slut shaming then becomes a very, very powerful tool to keep women in check, which is completely in line with the power structures. So, for years we've had men put on a dupatta, portray women, and mock those. This is why I say jokes have power. And if you still don't believe me, think about it. We have jokes about every ethnicity in Pakistan, except the most powerful one. We have jokes about every institution in Pakistan, except the most powerful one. To see who rules you, see who you can't joke about. We have jokes about every gender in Pakistan, except the most powerful one. We have jokes about every religion in Pakistan, except the most powerful one. This is how jokes have power. This is how perceptions are created about jokes. It might be hilarious to sit at a cafe in Islamabad and mock Afghans. But it's not that funny when people unironically call for all Afghanis in Islamabad to be thrown out of the country. Every single joke you make heightens the xenophobia. We live in a country where during the refugee crisis, a minister from Punjab said, we will not let Pathans come into Punjab. As if you need a visa to travel in your own country. We have a resistance movement. So every single time you look at a Pathan and make a joke, that xenophobia is only fueled on. That xenophobia is only added to. So rule number 3, subvert. I write a lot of satire for a lot of pieces, but satire will always stay a niche in Pakistan. Also, as a satirist, there is nothing I can conjure which is more unreal than reality in Pakistan. When the Council of Islamic Ideology in Pakistan opposed the Women's Protection Bill, I wrote a satirical piece which I thought was very extreme, which suggested the Council of Islamic Ideology should table a bill for men's protection. With ironic lines like, what better way to protect women than to ensure they never get out of the house? I thought I was kidding. Except a few months down the line, the Council of Islamic Ideology actually tabled a men's protection bill in the National Assembly. What is a satirist to do in a country like this? I even wrote pieces which said Pakistan will win any war against India. And if they had bothered to click on it, it literally had lines like, Tahir Shah is a better singer than Himesh Reshammiya. Except our political parties and our state institutions do not bother clicking. So a lot of them shared that article with the bravado you would expect from them. So what is a satirist to do? There will be a snowball effect even if you write in niche newspapers. But I feel in order to really make a difference, you have to go to the people. You have to show them the absurdity for what they're arguing it for. So when there was massive resistance to Aurat March and there was a call for a Mard March, rather than writing a thesis paper on how ridiculous a Mard March is, I made Mard March posters mocking what these potential demands could be. And they were as ludicrous as Vaseline Sasti Karo. And if you do not understand what that joke implies, congratulations on your innocence. We have to subvert. When we talk about satire, we have to show them how ridiculous something is by taking the logic of that to the most extreme degree. And this is what I try to do with my comedy. This is what I constantly strive for. So for even something like the Dirty Comedy Show, which I'm touring currently, it uses a lot of the same language we've grown up with, but it subverts. It changes the lens with which we look at things. I might still talk about things that we all grew up with, or things we all grew up joking about, but you view them with a different lens. So we're not mocking homosexuality, we're mocking homophobia. We're not saying things like, oh, if you're mean to me, I'll go marry your mother. I'm mocking the idea of 12-year-olds looking at each other and saying, I will marry your mother. You bring to attention the ridiculousness of certain jokes we've grown up with. And it's not about moral superiority. It's not about me standing here virtue signaling saying, look at how much better than I am from you. I grew up on the same jokes. I grew up forwarding the same jokes. I grew up making the same jokes. A lot of my friendships are, the bedrock of those friendships are the same jokes. But none of us are in school anymore. So when we argue, making fun of somebody's ethnicity is our freedom of speech, no. It's simply you wanting the freedom to be a terrible person to somebody and continue being that. It just takes a second for you to sit back and reflect. And I do not want to stand here and say this is the best form of comedy and anything else that anybody does is terrible. Because we're all on our own journeys. And somebody who's struggled with mental health, I realize comedy can be cathartic. I realize coming together and laughing can be a powerful tool for self-healing as well. And I also realize reappropriating certain terms within the community are powerful for that community as well. When black people use the N-word, it is not the same as white people using that. If a black comedian is talking about the difference between black people and the N-word, it is done with a completely different lens. So the last part of what I want to do is this. You have to make comedy about you. You have to make comedy about us. I cannot stand here and talk about everybody's experience in Pakistan. Yes, as a male comedian, I might have the privilege of doing a dirty show and talk about female sexuality and try and increase awareness about female sexuality without much blowback. Whereas a female comedian might be chastised for doing the same. We cannot continue telling each other stories. We have to ensure this space is not space that's occupied by just one person. The space, an inclusionary space where all of us are included. This is why 2 years ago, with the help of Puan, we did a comedy festival where 25 new voices were introduced. Where people came on stage to tell their own stories, to tell about their own lives, to take power back by using their own words. And this is where we need to get at, where everybody has a microphone. They might not have the power to uplift their entire community, but they might have the power to stand in front of a crowd one night and punch up. Take some of that power back, bloody that nose of Goliath. And this is what we need to do. And despite what you see on television every single night, we do live in a culture where there is potential for comedy like this. When somebody tells me that jokes in Pakistan have always been about race, ethnicity, or sex or gender, I vehemently disagree because I've actually done my research. A lot of the stage show comedy, the improv and the joghat style comes from the culture of bhand, which is a folk theatre form which used the improv and joghat style but infused it with social satire. A lot of you might have seen sketches like Janu German or Dubai Jaane Wale, where the joke is that a character can't speak in English. It's a trope that's used in stage shows as well, where a character is deliberately muddling up the English language. That joke comes from the Bhand culture. Now think about the politics of that joke. The Bhand culture, which was thriving during the British rule. A time where if you do not speak the English language, you don't have power, you don't have access. In that time, a local comedian is mocking the very idea that he cannot speak the English language. And he's taking power back by mocking his own inability to speak English, by mocking the very tool of his oppression, the English language itself. Power is always contextual. So when I'm in America and I'm writing articles about how Muslims are being portrayed in Homeland, or how it's ironic that everybody is asking for all Muslims to apologize, in Pakistan, I might write similar articles about how minorities are being persecuted in Pakistan. Power is contextual. And in Pakistan, we have to tell stories that are ours, that are culturally contextualized, and are varied and diverse. This is why I'm so happy that we have all-female improv troupes like Aurat Tak, as well as the Khawatoons. For years, we've had jokes about women told by men. Now we have jokes about women told by women. We even have a drag comedy show in Pakistan. We have a trans comedian in Lahore telling her own story. Let's amplify these voices. Let's make sure we're making fun of the oppressors. Let's make sure we're laughing at them together. Let's cause this social change by making sure these inclusive spaces exist. And my hope is that in the future, comedians in Pakistan a lot more about this, rather than just another old male comedian making a career out of pretending to be a Khwaja Sira on national television. Thank you.